Hey everyone, Steven here, and welcome to my little library of horrors. So, my channel is mainly focused around vintage horror. That's usually what I like. That's, what I've kind of gotten accustomed to. But every once in a while, I do kind of like to dip my toes into modern horror and see what else is out there. See, you know, sort of how things have changed over the years since then. I'll be honest, it's usually pretty miss for me. I find that a lot of the time, I shouldn't say most, a lot of modern authors tend to be too focused on getting the action out within the beginning of the story and focusing on scenes rather than characters and overall story, I should say. That's at least how I feel in a lot of the stuff I do tend to read that's, sort of past the 2000, I'd say even 12 mark. Everything starts to be a lot more fast paced. A lot of tension tends to take a side seat for more action and gore and things like that. So, it's usually not my cup of tea. So hence why I tend to stick to more vintage horror. However, every once in a while, I do find a book that has been written within the past couple years that really tends to stand out and not only sort of keeps the spirit of vintage horror alive, but also holds its own identity amongst modern horror. And one book that in particular that really did that for me is Rules of the Road by C.B. Jones. I'll go ahead and give you a second to really appreciate that amazing cover art. Something that I have absolutely no issue admitting that is almost completely lost in today's times is the beauty of the cover art. But Jones certainly took the time to get this down right. I know the artist is, I believe his name is Kyle Goldtooth. Yes, is the cover design. So, wonderful job by Kyle Goldtooth here. So, back after I had read Fantastic Land by Mike Bockoven, I was absolutely ravenous for more epistolary tales. So, I was part of the Books of Horror Facebook group, and I had made a post stating as such, I wanted more epistolary tales and was looking for some. And that's when Jones himself had commented on my post and said, hey, my novel, I just published my first novel. It's an epistolary tale that I really think you would enjoy. So him and I messaged back and forth for a little bit, and he sent me an Audible code to check out his book. So I popped it on, gave it a listen, and instantly fell in love with it. It is by far one of my favorite books, and I actually just did a reread, hence why I'm reviewing it now, and it just further cements why I completely love this story. There's just so many great things to say, and I want to get into explaining what they are. So, what is the story about? So, the story is about a man that is driving one day at night, and he happens to hear this strange radio broadcast come over his radio, and with the program called The Rules of the Road, in which the host explains basically if you happen to come across this really strange scenario, in this instance, if you see a sole's shoe on the side of the road, to pull over and put a sock inside of it. And if you don't, well, consequences will ensue. So as our protagonist does so, he comes across a shoe, and he starts to debate, should I do it? It could have just been some kind of prank, but, does it really hurt? So as he decides to pull over and put the sock on the shoe, this strange occurrence happens that sticks with him and causes him to fixate on it. And shortly after that, he creates this website called The Rules of the Road, in which he seeks out other people who have possibly heard this broadcast. And with him basically assuming that he, it's probably a prank by someone, maybe he just heard something, it's not going to go anywhere. He's suddenly inundated with emails and messages about people all over the country who have heard this mysterious broadcast. And so he basically strings together certain interviews with people who have heard the broadcast, and that's what the story encompasses, is all these different people who have, different rules, different consequences, and what followed after they heard that broadcast. So yeah, it's just really fantastic the way that Jones is able to. So basically, to explain it, the thing is, it is cosmic horror. I am not super well versed in cosmic horror. The reason being is sort of due to my own preconceived notions. When I hear cosmic horror, I think, Cthulhu, fish people, H.P. Lovecraft, things of that nature. And that just genuinely doesn't interest me, to be totally honest. I kind of like my horror more grounded. The less I have to suspend my disbelief, the more engaged I am with the story. So that's just kind of how I am. However, after reading Rules of the Road, it taught me that cosmic can be way more than I thought, and much, much more grounded than I ever thought it could be, which just sounds completely strange still to say to me, because you think cosmic, it's outer worldly. How could that possibly be, blended in with our everyday life so naturally? Well, Jones does that exceptionally well. I have to check my notes. I made sure I took notes, because there are, instead of going over every single chapter in the book, I kind of wanted to highlight my favorite chapters and what I think makes them stand out throughout the story and help emphasizes the book overall. One of the very first things I really love is chapter 5, What's Your Name? In chapter 5, it's told from this girl who calls, and she basically is a social media manager for someone who is her friend, who becomes very popular on Instagram. She becomes a traveling influencer. So, her friend does the photography, the captions, things like that, is her social media manager. And eventually, the relationship starts to sour as, the manager is basically getting tired of the lifestyle. It's getting to be too much for her. She feels that her friend is starting to get too buried into her social media fame. And eventually they come to a not a podcast, they hear the broadcast as they're driving. So the rule is, if you stop at a gas station and you find those little keychains that have, your name on it, you have to buy it. And the thing is like, so they do end up going to a gas station. They find the social media manager is convinced that she's not going to find her name because she has such a unique name. Sure enough, there it is. And, so she tells her client, like, hey, you go ahead. I'll pick up the keychain for us both. I'll pick up both of our keychains. She only gets her own name, doesn't pick up her client's name. And hence we start to see the consequences of her actions start to unfold. And there is just this insane twist near the end, like the last few paragraphs of the chapter. It's just like, it just totally hit me out of nowhere. I was like, oh my God, what? And it's just like, I've even now, like I literally have goosebumps just thinking about the twists in that chapter. It's crazy. It's so just awesome. And it just, it's hard to explain it without spoiling it, but trust me, like, it's a twist you won't see coming, but totally fits the whole chapter so well. And that's sort of a theme throughout the book is like the consequences aren't always clear, if that makes any sense. Like, I'm really trying to explain it without getting too spoilery. So, before I get into the other chapters, let me explain easily my favorite part of the book, and that is our Rules of the Road host, Buck Hensley. Buck Hensley is easily one of the most interesting characters I've ever come across in a book. And, excuse me. Especially through his Audible performance. I love... Excuse me just a second. Sorry about that. Another late night interruption. School's back in 2 weeks. School's back in 2 weeks. School's back in 2 weeks. Anyway, I really loved the performer that did Buck's character in the audiobook because it is so over-the-top Southern, but so amazing at the same time. Like, Buck Hensley is this... It's so fascinating, his character, because he draws you in right away. He has this personality that instantly magnetizes you to him. He's upbeat, he's joyous, he's slick. Like, the way he talks is very slick. He's very relatable as well. But the thing is Buck's personality can change sort of like a radio dial. You know what I mean? It's like when he comes on, the volume's all the way to the max. He's, howdy, folks, it's your host, Buck Hensley. And it's wonderful. But then as he's sort of lulling you into, like, this sort of, like, hey, it's me, Buck, your old friend, his voice starts to lower, and he starts to kind of talk a little darker. His euphemisms become a little more grim. And it's just so eerie how it just turns the dial down, and he gives you the chills. And it's the way he delivers the message of the rules. It's the thing is he gets in your head because he tells you the rule, and then immediately after he's like, now I know what you're thinking, and he tells you exactly what you're thinking, and it's so eerie. It's so eerie because it's word for word exactly what I would think had I heard this while I'm driving. And he always goes, and to that I say, fair enough. He's not telling you, hey, I'm not telling you you have to do these things. I'm simply the messenger in this. Whether you do them or not, that's up to you. And I just love that about Buck's character. It's hard to pin him as an antagonist because I don't think he's an antagonist because he straight up says, like, you don't have to do it. But in the same way, it's like, obviously if you don't do it, there's consequences that ensue. So it makes him an incredibly complex character. And I love that. I just genuinely love that. He is so eerie, but so hypnotizing at the same time. Like, anytime, I genuinely anticipate hearing his broadcast during the whole chapter, because it doesn't start off right away with him just like, hey, here's the rule of the road, now here's the story. We get a lot of backstory before the broadcast comes on. So Jones does a wonderful job of setting up sort of the context of the broadcast itself. And so yeah, Buck is just an amazing character that really, really brings the book way up, way up. The next chapter I really, really loved was chapter 7, Time After Time. In this chapter, we get this man who essentially, you could say, is dead inside, essentially. He finds his third wife in bed with another man. He's not upset. He's just kind of basically at the age now where he doesn't care. Like I said, he basically feels dead inside. So as he's traveling one day, he gets the broadcast, and his rule is if you happen to see an odd number speed sign, you have to go that speed limit until you hit another speed limit sign. And then, you can do whatever you want. And what's interesting with that chapter is that it shows that, like, I guess sort of the unfairness of the rules. Because it's like, this guy is following the rule, but then has some trucker behind him basically riding his ass, not paying attention. And it's either he keeps the speed that he's going, or he ends up getting sandwiched between a semi-truck and another vehicle in front of him. So, he has to essentially break the rule, which isn't his fault. But then we get to see these consequences unfold in real time. And that's a thing that I really love about the story, is we're not just getting secondhand, tellings of, okay, I heard this broadcast a year ago, I'm still dealing with these consequences. We hear what's happening to him in real time. And this one I'll explain what the consequence is basically he ends up moving so fast that to everyone around him, he's moving slower than a slug's pace. But within his own mind, within his perception, he's going light years at a time. So he's essentially trapped in this light year warp speed where everyone else is still going within normal time. My camera's doing a weird, funky lighting thing. I have no idea why, so I apologize about that. So yeah, that's just a really awesome detail that I love about the book, is that, again, it's not just, okay, this person told me this is what happened to them. We are experiencing with our protagonists what is happening when these rules are being broken. So that's just a really nice detail that I think adds a level of excitement to the story, because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if this is a consequence they're currently going through, if this is something they have to go through for the rest of their life, if it's something they've been through already and they're done. So because there's all of those within the story, is people who have survived the rules of the road, people who broke the rules, and things like that. So I really love that. Let's see here. Let's see. Probably one of, if not my favorite chapter in the story. It's hard to say it's my favorite. I can't say it's my favorite. One of my favorite chapters is chapter 9, Call Me. And with this, the chapter revolves around these two immigrant characters. One is legal, one is not legal. And they're on a road trip basically to see as many waterfalls as they can. And so during their travels, they end up getting pulled over by the police. And, as they're being interrogated, they suddenly realize, the person that's pulled them over is only impersonating a police officer and is planning on doing them harm, basically. And, but, as the scene's going on, the female character during this chapter is, trying to call 911, but she has the phone number programmed into her phone from the broadcast that they heard earlier in the night. So, which told them, call me if you're looking for a good time. That's what it was. Buck said, if you go into a gas station, you see a number on the bathroom stall, make sure you call that number. So she calls the number during the interview, whatever. So they end up getting away from the cop, and it ends up turning into this really intense scene where they're on sort of this farm, and they're playing a big cat and mouse game between the cop and the two characters. And all of a sudden the cop gets attacked by this creature, like just absolutely mauled. And so the two characters get away, and the outcome of her calling the number happens and all of that stuff. So as the chapter's winding down and we start to, the main protagonist of the story, I forget his name. I don't even know if we ever learn his name, but I have forgotten it. He looks up a news article about that night of what happened. And as you're reading the news article, again, it's this absolutely brilliant twist that not only it just really wraps up the chapter nicely, it's a perfect blend of supernatural and real life. And that's something I have said many times. I think even the best authors have a really difficult time doing, is blending, anything supernatural and making it to the point where it's believable that this could actually happen in real life. And Jones does that in this chapter. Just seeing what happens, it's just brilliant. It's simply brilliant. There's no other way for me to put it. It's simply brilliant how he blends those together to where I literally didn't have to suspend disbelief at all. You know what I mean? It's like, I guess at first it's like, okay, it's a creature, whatever. Of course I have to suspend my disbelief. But then, like I said, as it starts to get to the end of the chapter, you're like, holy crap, that was awesome. Just, for one, it's something I never even knew. And for two, again, it just is mind-blowing how awesome it is. Let's see. The next chapter I really enjoyed is chapter 11, Landslide. With that, that's probably one of my favorite chapters, and with that, it entails the story of a girl who heard the broadcast when she was a child. She was on a family trip with her mother, her stepfather, and her newly born baby brother. And, they're on a road trip to the Grand Canyon and everything. And, she doesn't hear a broadcast through the radio. She's playing her Game Boy Color, which instantly one of my favorite things about the chapter is all of the 90s callbacks. It's like, with vintage horror, you get a lot of obvious stuff set in the 70s, the 80s, and things like that. So seeing stuff set in a generation that I grew up in, Game Boy Colors and Discmans and stuff like that, really awesome nostalgia. I can't lie about that. It's just really nice to kind of see that stuff come up in books when you really don't ever see it. So, but anyway, our character's playing, Super Mario Land, and, it's instead of a broadcast, it starts to unravel in through the Mario game where, she goes down a pipe and, it's this place she's never seen before in the game, and, Mario's not acting right. Things are starting to happen within the game and stuff like that. And the game audio turns to Buck Hensley. And, he gives her rule. And, so she doesn't end up going through with the rule. Consequences ensue. And, but now we're seeing her as an adult still dealing with these consequences. And it's awesome because she has, without getting too much into her story, she has turned those consequences almost into this superpower for good. She's almost become this sort of vigilante. And it's just so cool. Because it's like, there's either, I don't know, there's like, it doesn't seem like there's ever a great outcome with the rules, whether you do them or not. So for her to like I said, basically turn this into a superpower is just really awesome. Just really, really cool. And let's see, my favorite chapter for sure is the very last chapter besides the epilogue, and that is chapter 15, Greatest Hits. Within chapter 15, our main protagonist has finally become completely consumed with the rules of the road and sets out to discover who Buck Hensley is and what the rules of the road is. So he starts to travel and goes in search of Buck Hensley. And basically chapter 15 is a Buck Hensley origin story. And it is absolutely heart-wrenching, amazing, real. Just like, it's almost kind of like peeking at a Christmas present in your parents' closet. And it's wrapped, and you unwrap it, and you unwrap it. You're taking off the bow, you're ripping the paper, and then you get to the lid. And you just can't get yourself to lift the lid. And that's exactly, basically how Buck Hensley's origin story is we get all of this look back into who Buck was, how he became who he was, and why he's doing what he's doing. But there's still just a couple questions left to where it makes you want more. It doesn't leave the story feeling incomplete. It makes you want more, but not in a way where you feel cheated at the end. And it's just like, it is like I said, Buck is this amazing character throughout the entirety of the story. And you just want to know more about him. So as we're starting to discover his backstory and seeing who he is, who he was, it's where you really start to kind of, like I said, is Buck an antagonist? Is what he's doing out of spite and evilness? And it's like, I don't think so much out of spite. I shouldn't say that. Not so much out of evilness. I think out of spite. And I can't really go into more detail than that without spoiling it. So it's like, I can understand Buck, but I can't wholeheartly agree with him either. And it's just, it's a really, really interesting concept. And not only that, it ties the entire story together. All these seemingly random rules aren't random at all. And it's just like, it's just another reason why I love the chapter, because it, again, all these seemingly random interviews and broadcasts and stuff like that, it brings it all together where you're just like, wow, okay, I get it now. This all makes perfect sense. And I love that. But yeah, other than that, it ends on a really awesome note. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what I have to say about it. It is genuinely a fantastically well done book. And I had just as much fun with it the second time around as I did the first time. One thing I really want to give praise to is not so much the book itself, but the Audible version. Jones had told me that, he didn't hire a professional cast to record his book. It's actually a bunch of his friends, himself, his friends, other authors he knows. And, I'll be honest, you can tell at points, it's not a professional recording, but I can't sit there and knock the book for that. You know what I mean? Like, these are people who have never been in probably a recording booth ever in their lives. These are people who are not used to reading out loud to people, getting into character and stuff like that. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, some people do fantastically. Like I said, the person who does Buck, like, man, you got to look into doing some voice acting or something, because hats off, man. Hats off. Brilliant, brilliant job. So yeah, I do really want to give really high praise for the cast that went above and beyond, you know, giving their all for Jones's book in that recording. You know, it must have been really intimidating and really stressful, so you all did a wonderful job with that. So yeah, what would I give Rules of the Road? Definitely a 5 out of 5. You know, it's intense, it's scary at times, it's really moving, and it's got everything I want in a horror story. So yeah, I went ahead and I purchased it directly from Jones. He left me this really wonderful inscription here. He even drew them like a little road there. But yeah, he inscribed it with Buck's famous outro: "Stay safe, stay lively, stay lonely." But yeah, everyone, that's going to be it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll leave a description to Jones's book in the description below. So yeah, please feel free to check it out. I got a signed copy for $17 shipped, which is a steal, especially for, you know, a really decently sized book. Jones is an indie author, so I really, really recommend checking his work out. He does have some other works as well, which he did actually send me a copy, as I ordered it, of his latest book, Crybaby Bridge, which I haven't read yet, but I am absolutely excited to get to. But, yeah. So, until next time, everyone, be nice to yourselves, and maybe keep an extra pair of socks in your trunk. Later, everyone.